These two little guys, my twin boys, Cyrus and Jasper, are at the center of my heart and of my mind and of my days. And I'm not just showing you this to be all touchy-feely and get to talk about my boys, although I love any excuse to do so, as any of you who have talked to me for more than 30 seconds know. But I believe being a mom has actually reminded me of some really great things, some great truths about entrepreneurship. And they remind me of these truths about entrepreneurship. Every day, the two things that I see in them are as follows. One, they wake up happy. They wake up excited to have adventures and to explore the world. They see the world as a great place full of excitement and opportunity. So that's their attitude every day when they wake up. And secondly, as I watch them grow and develop, I mean, having known them from the second that they were born, I believe so much more than I ever did that they and that every single one of us have great potential, are just born with everything we need to do great things in the world. It's just a matter of slowly growing and developing those gifts and those talents and deciding to pursue the things that we love. So the world is a good place, full of opportunity, and we all have great potential to do whatever it is that we choose to do. Those two realities, I actually believe, are at the center of entrepreneurship too, at the heart, if you will, of entrepreneurship. Great entrepreneurs see opportunity, sometimes in unexpected places or places that others overlook. They're experts at that. And they decide that they have what it takes to create value out of those opportunities. They decide, often in a very methodical way, sometimes in a haphazard way, but they decide to create organizations or movements to tap into those opportunities and create value. Now, social entrepreneurs, and I'll caveat this by saying I recognize with this excellent audience, if I asked everybody in this room what their definition of entrepreneurship and even of social entrepreneurship is, I'd have at least a definition per person. So these are the basic ways that I see these two ideas, but I look forward during Q&A and later on to hearing what your thoughts are as well. So entrepreneurship, those two elements. Social entrepreneurship, just adjust these a little bit. I believe social entrepreneurs are committed to creating value in a broader sense, creating value not just for paying customers, but for every human being, as many people as they can, in a far and wide sort of way. And they see opportunity even maybe more than other entrepreneurs do, I think, because they see opportunity and potential in each individual, which is why they believe in serving far and wide and serving as many as they can. Therefore, social entrepreneurs measure impact, measure value differently. They talk about and think about social impact, not just return on investment, but sort of a social benefit, a social return. So we can talk more about that later if we'd like. But those two ideas are sort of at the core of entrepreneurship and social entrepreneurship. Now, sadly, if I look back at my life and I think about, okay, where really did my own entrepreneurial journey begin? It began in a moment when, unfortunately, these truths, these, I think, inherent truths, people are born with potential. The world is a great place full of adventures and opportunities to be had. I think my entrepreneurial journey began in a moment when I started to question these things. I started to think, wait, maybe not everybody has that full potential that I so inherently believe, and maybe not everywhere in the world people can go pursue opportunities in the way that I think we all should be able to. And unfortunately, a lot of the way that this worldview started to shift for me and these doubts sort of started to creep in came from messaging from a lot of wonderful, well-intentioned nonprofit organizations, NGOs, that basically showed me a story of poverty that this image represents pretty well. I heard stories of sadness and of suffering, stories of desperation and hopelessness, stories that made me, with my own relative, American middle-class wealth, made me feel guilty about my own situation and the gifts that I'd been given. And in fact, perhaps even made me feel a little bit shameful, because often these stories, these mind-numbing statistics about the poor in the world and about poverty, often they were paired with sort of an ask, right? So the formula was sort of as follows. Hear about poverty, hear a horrible statistic, or see a sad, frowning person with flies on their face, and see this sort of image and hear this story that makes you feel all panicked inside. Then be told about how you can, thanks to the work of this great nonprofit, you can participate and you can sort of free yourself from feeling so bad about the stories and the statistics that you just heard by contributing to their work. And often the pitch is very convincing. It's strange, I think, this grand call to action, emphasis on the bigness of the problem, but then often a very small request is paired with that. So in this infomercial, which is near and dear to me because I remember seeing this so many times growing up, Sally Struthers, God bless her, I remember would walk through a village, there'd be children trailing after her, she'd tell me scary stuff about the kids, but then say, but for the cost of a cup of coffee, if you just put, pennies a day towards this fund, we can help change children's lives. It's a very difficult thing to grapple with. I know for me, I won't go off too much into a tangent here, but I know for me, I often thought, okay, well, do I have to do this every time I hear the infomercial? Do I have to not drink my coffee because I really like my coffee? Do I have to give more than the cup of coffee? Like, what's enough? How do I think about this? So these messages started to make me feel very unsure as to what my role was. But the one thing that I did know was happening to me as I heard these stories was that emotionally I started to tune out. I started to shut out those stories of sadness because they seemed all the same to me. I felt like at some point I had kind of heard enough. I knew what the story was going to be, so I stopped really genuinely listening. And I also figured, time and again, I was told that my role was really just to give my money, and that was it. That was all that was really required of me. So I started to just sort of throw my change in the jar, so to speak, or write my tiny check, or sign up for more volunteer hours, but give a thing that I could give, but still stay very disengaged. And at my worst, I sometimes felt like I was just pushing my money at something so that I wouldn't have to hear the sad news anymore. I was buying my right to go on with my day and think about other stuff. I was buying my distance from the problem and from the people that I associated with that problem of poverty. Now, fast forward a bunch. That, what I just described to you, reflects probably the first decade or two of my life and my experiences and my relationship with poverty and the poor. I ended up going to undergraduate at Bucknell University. I studied philosophy and poetry and political science, not business, not entrepreneurship. It didn't seem relevant to me at the time. I wanted to study things that I loved and that helped me think critically and communicate well and ask the right questions and understand power structures so that I could figure out how we could, I change the system to make everything better and to make poverty go away. So that was my best attempt for 4 years of college to figure things out. And then after college, this is not a prescriptive moment of my talk, I'm just telling you sort of the plain, good, bad, and ugly truth. I didn't have much of a strategic career plan, so I moved very much on a whim to California, and I landed in this big house with a bunch of friends on Sand Hill Road, right across the street from Stanford University's campus. And day 2 of moving to California with my 2 suitcases to see what would happen, I walked across the street and I wandered around Stanford University's campus and handed out my resume to anybody that would take it. And that day I got a temporary administrative role, an administrative position, just for a few weeks at the Stanford Business School. Now, I vividly remember thinking, ugh, business school, these are not my people. This is not what I care about. They don't care about alleviating poverty, they care about making money, and that is obviously irrelevant. So I was very judgmental, and I didn't really want to be there, but I really needed to pay my rent. So I stayed. Now, it just so happened that my temp job was in this amazing research center called the Center for Social Innovation. And what the Center for Social Innovation nurtures are leaders, students, a whole team of administration and faculty members, this wonderful community of people who believe that you can actually chip away at social problems by applying business skills and business thinking. Center for Social Innovation. I didn't understand that that's where I had landed, but it just so happened I'd landed in a really good place where a lot of people every day were thinking about the problems that I cared about too, and were applying these really interesting strategies to solve those problems. So fast forward a little bit more, it's a few years out of college, I stayed and worked for 3 years at the Stanford Graduate School of Business in the Center for Social Innovation. My job changed and evolved. And basically, one day after work, I heard that there was this guy, Dr. Muhammad Yunus, coming to speak on campus. I'd never heard of him before, but the flyer, the little email blast that went out to everybody said, this is a banker to the poor, which sounded a little bit sketchy to me. I didn't know what that meant, so I was skeptical. This banker to the poor was going to lecture that evening, and I thought, why not? So I crashed the lecture, sat in the back in case I wanted to leave early because I had my doubts. And of course, this evening, hearing Dr. Muhammad Yunus's story changed my life. And to summarize very quickly, the things that changed me and the things that sort of made it a big aha moment for me were as follows. One, he talked to me about microfinance. It was the first time I'd ever heard of this strange thing, financial services and products for the very poor. So, and if this is a new term for any of you, just think about the things that you access at your bank and think about how those might be changed, how those products and services would be adjusted to somebody living on a few dollars a day. So very, very small loan programs. Insurance programs built around whether or not it rains for a farmer to, harvest have a good yield that year. So very different, the same kind of products where many of us probably are familiar with, but tailored to the needs of a very different audience. So anyway, number one, Dr. Yunus talked about microfinance. It sounded almost too good to be true, but it wasn't. Number two, he told his story in an incredibly accessible way. Here's this gentleman. It was the fall of '03, 3 years before he and his Grameen Bank, the organization he started, would win the Nobel Peace Prize for their work pioneering modern microfinance. He was just this guy that had a message and a mission, and I was hearing him, but he talked about his story in a way that made me think, maybe I could do something like that too. Basically, the key element for me in his story was the moment when, instead of continuing to teach at the University of Chittagong in Bangladesh as a very well-educated professor teaching macroeconomics, he decided to walk across town, more or less, and I'm paraphrasing here, sit down with a group of women who were basket weavers and ask them directly why they thought they were poor, and to listen. And as they explained their situation to him, that they were stuck in this cycle of borrowing money from moneylenders that charged them 300 to 3,000%, I mean, crazy numbers, he basically said, well, would it help if I lend you money at a fair rate? And of course it did, and the rest is sort of microfinance history. With that access to a fair loan, these individuals, these women, were able to slowly lift themselves and their families out of poverty. It was a magical story. But for me, hearing that he had really started this great work by sitting down and listening well to people gave me hope. Me, the philosophy, poetry major that did not know what my skills were in the world to be useful, I thought, well, and perhaps naively, I thought, maybe I can do that too. Maybe I can sit and listen really well and do something very common sense as a response to what I hear and help people. So that inspired me. And third, so microfinance, accessible story. And then third, I realized Dr. Yunus that night was talking about the poor in a way that didn't make me feel awful and guilty and shameful about my own relative wealth. He was talking about smart, strong, hardworking entrepreneurs who were doing everything right. They just needed access to this resource that I had had access to my whole life. And something shifted for me. My worldview had been changed. Because I didn't feel bad, I didn't feel guilty, I actually wanted to hear those stories again. I didn't want to have that emotional wall up. I believed that there was a different story of poverty and of entrepreneurship to be told. And so I went hunting, I went trying to find this. A few weeks later, after hearing Dr. Yunus speak, I quit my job at Stanford. Again, I'm not recommending, go quit your jobs, go move all over the world, but if you do, let me know how it goes and I will cheer you on. But I did this, I moved to East Africa for a few months, and I basically begged my way into an internship that would allow me to interview entrepreneurs, 150 of them, that had received $100 to start or grow their business. The most basic and small sort of financial product that I could find out there. And I heard from goat herders and seamstresses and small restaurant owners and people that had set up kiosks and just stands out of scraps of old wood and sticks to sell fruits or vegetables or whatever else. People that were doing the most basic businesses, but who were entrepreneurs and who had used this money to, again, change the trajectory of their lives. So I heard great stories of business success, but more importantly, I heard details of stories and details of life change that galvanized for me that there was a different way to see poverty, to see the poor, more importantly, and to engage with them. As I heard these stories, I encountered people who, shocker, were actually happy, not sad with flies all over their faces. They were happy and proud of their work and proud of what they'd been doing. I met people who already had a bit of a success story going. Maybe they had started with a needle and thread under the shade of a tree, but now they had capital equipment and an office. I met people who just, encountering them in a scene of abundance, in a fully stocked shop versus a scene of scarcity, changed what I felt in the deepest parts of myself about them and about the poor and about their potential. And honestly, encountering individuals that were offering me things, which happened all the time, that had full hands with something to give versus an empty hand waiting for a handout, changed everything for me. So I and my co-founder of Kiva, Matt, started to ask these questions. We started to say, well, look, if there's a different story of poverty to be told, and every individual has a unique story to be told, that the internet was making more and more possible, obviously, to get out there, we thought, well, what if we share these stories? And what if instead of giving people that same old option of throw your money in the jar and go on with your life, and we, the big, amazing organization, will take care of the rest, instead of that, what if we allowed people to engage directly and connect directly and just to lend money directly? If that's what individuals want, why can't you lend? That's strange. So we started to ask these very simple what-if questions that of course led to the development of Kiva. And the way it works today, well, the way it worked then, I'll tell you because it's kind of funny, was me running around Uganda with my camera, taking pictures of friends. The pilot round of loans was 7 individuals from one village in Uganda who needed a total of about $3,000 bucks. And Matt and I spammed our friends and family and said, we think this is legal, we think this will work, what do you say, won't this be fun? That was our business pitch, won't this be fun? Basically overnight that money came in and all 7 entrepreneurs got funded. Over the next 6 months they repaid, and we decided, well, our idea works, we're official. So we took the word beta off of the site and we launched for real. And since then, and I'll tell you the growth, but since then, many more individuals have gotten listed on the site. Of course, today what we do, and we have been doing for years, is we work with existing microfinance institutions, existing banks for the poor. We allow them to have an account with us and to post profiles of entrepreneurs that they'd like to serve on the website. And we then allow the world to come and contribute $25, $50, whatever you'd like, towards those loan needs, and over time get paid back if the entrepreneur repays, which 99+% of the time they do. But so from that original pilot round of loans, that $3,000 bucks, in October of 2005, when we took the word beta off of the site and said, we're official, we're real, this works. That first year, somehow we facilitated $500,000 in loans. We were over the moon. The second year, the total was up to 15 million. The third year, around 40. The fourth year, around 100 million. And we're about to cross $500 million in loans from lenders and individuals. Yay, lenders. From lenders, thank you, and borrowers in more countries than the UN recognizes, just all over the world. So it's just been such a joy and an honor to get to watch this thing that is so much bigger than myself grow and become real and become owned by and special to so many other individuals in the world who feel like it is theirs as well, which it is. So that's the state of Kiva today, and this is a picture of the homepage. And what I'd like to do now is transition and sort of do the last part of my talk by reflecting on, I don't think they're new lessons. I don't think you'll say, wow, I have never heard this before. What I'd like to do is just share some reminders. I talk about how some of the most inherent truths, the most important truths, I'm reminded by my kids of these things every day. What I'd like to do is also remind all of us of some of the things that I think not only are true, but that really have worked in Kiva's journey and in my own journey personally, and that I believe are great things to keep in mind every day, whatever you're doing, whether you see yourself as an entrepreneur, whether you are hopeful to live an entrepreneurial life someday and maybe be an entrepreneur, or whatever work you're doing. I think these things are true because what works in an organizational setting, in your personal life, wherever, it works sort of across the board, I think, if it's a really solid nugget of truth. So the first reminder might sound basic, but it's called Know Your Mission. And this is really just about identity, knowing who you are and knowing who you're not. Might sound simple, but I think especially, I'm just going to make an assumption here. I bet everybody in this room, we're a very privileged group, and I bet that we've had great opportunities come our way, again, personally, professionally, in all categories of our lives. It's not a matter of getting, an objectively great opportunity or pursuing something that other people might say, great job, that's a good thing, or that's, a lot of money, or a fantastic position, or a great person that's come into your life. I believe it's really about knowing who you are and knowing who you're not and screening those opportunities that are going to come on by and choosing the ones that help you become more you, not just something objectively good. So, for example, I will just say this. Kiva, this is, I think, a nice example. Kiva has a mission statement. This is sort of the way Kiva expresses its identity. And it's to connect people through lending for poverty alleviation. I'll say that again really quickly. To connect people, which is kind of the what. That's the point. That's what Kiva does, connects people. The way that it's done is through lending. That's sort of the how. And the why is for poverty alleviation. That's very much the point of why we connect people through lending. So the what and the how and the why, that statement, it might sound very simple, but it's been enough to guide the organization over, 8 years now, to make decisions and say yes or no with equal ease and equal peace of mind to great opportunities that have come our way. As an example, 2 years in, I kind of talked about the growth trajectory, but 2 years in, we had just barely crossed the $10 million mark in terms of loans facilitated. And we get a phone call. And it's a startup, everyone does everything, so I pick up the phone not knowing if it's press or customer service or whatever. And it's this gentleman on the line, and I don't want to be mean about it, but he just seemed like a guy that would be a little bit intimidating to speak to in real life. One of these guys who would be like, hey, and look over your shoulder to talk to somebody else because you weren't cool enough. But it was this guy who kind of barked into the phone, hey, love what you guys are doing at Kiva. I'm picturing this, We, this enormous corporation that will remain anonymous, have $10 million in our new corporate social responsibility budget that we'd like to put into Kiva. What do you say? I should stop. And I remember, he got all this out before I'd said 2 words. I remember asking him, okay, well, that's great. Thank you so much. What exactly do you mean? Do you mean you'd like to divide up $10 million among your employees, among your clients, anyone else that you know, and give individuals gift certificates so they can come to the site and read about entrepreneurs all over the planet, and then choose somebody that resonates with them, and then lend their money and get updates over 8 or 9 or 10 months, whatever it is, and learn about how the goat herder's kids are in school now, and see a picture of the new goat, and see the new house that they've constructed, and then they get the money back and they can lend again, et cetera, et cetera. Do you want to do that? Or do you just want to dump the money in, have it do its thing, get it back, and kind of pat yourselves on the back and go on with your corporate social responsibility initiative? And in short, of course, it was the latter, and there were no other options that worked for him. It was just, he didn't want to spend the time to do anything but dump it in, get it back. And so I confidently, and on the same phone call, without hesitation said, well, no thank you, it's not a fit for us, but here are a dozen other organizations that would be very happy to take your $10 million all in one check. But think about it, if Kiva would have taken that money, and a lot of other money that has come Kiva's way that was not the right fit, if that money had been just absorbed into the system, it would have taken thousands and thousands of opportunities away from individuals that would come to the site with their own $25, their own $50 to have that experience. And that's what Kiva is really about. It's not, let's just raise a bunch of money for microfinance. It's not, let's be a big network of microfinance institutions. It's about connecting individuals. So, little lesson, little example about how identity, I think, is incredibly important to making the right decisions and saying yes or no to great things in a way that you feel really confident and peaceful about. Life gets a lot easier, I think, when you know to your core who you are and who you're not. The big and the little decisions aren't hard. Okay, second reminder, learning to listen, which you're all doing a very great job of to me, so I probably could skip this one. I think great things, great ideas, great relationships, great projects, great movements come out of a deep empathy for the other individual that you intend to serve, that you desire so deeply to serve. And I think, this lesson, there's a way to do this right, and I think it requires, it's old school, it requires time, real contact, and a real desire to be open and to learn, not to go in with preconceived notions. I have a person that I admire so much, is named Paul Pollock. He started International Development Enterprises. And he has a book that I highly recommend called Out of Poverty. And in this book, in the first chapter or two, he basically says this. He says, look, it's great if you, reader, would like to serve people and help alleviate poverty and all that good stuff, but don't even start, don't even try unless you go and spend a lot of time with the people you want to serve, because you'll probably mess things up. And I remember reading this and thinking, oh my gosh, that's so harsh, but I actually have come to believe that it's pretty much true. Even with our very best intentions, we can often misread what the situation is, and especially from far away without having real face-to-face, on-the-ground sort of experiences with people that we want to serve, we can often guess wrong about what's going to be best for them. Now, building on this, not just being a good listener the way Dr. Eunice did, and unbeknownst to me, the way that I got this opportunity to do during my 3 months, almost a decade ago in East Africa, listening to entrepreneur after entrepreneur. Building on this idea of empathy, I think, is this wonderful concept of co-creation, which takes things a step farther. Not just saying, okay, who are you, what are you like, what do you need, and then going back and building something and expecting it to be beneficial to them, but actually continuing to engage individuals in what you're building so it really truly becomes a movement, and so that they have ownership in an ongoing way. It's scary to do this, I think, particularly when you're doing something not for the money necessarily, but because you believe in it and it's your dream and it's your passion and you want to make a social impact. To give that away, to lose any control of that, even to the people that you want to serve, can be scary, because you probably have a very particular vision of what you want to have happen in the world. And your currency is getting to do that, right? Your currency is not the big financial paycheck necessarily. That's another story. They don't have to be separate. But your currency is this feeling of influence and this reality that you can really make a difference in someone else's life. So to share that with other people and with the people that you want to serve is a little bit scary. But I beg you to override those feelings of wanting to control things and wanting to, believe that you might know best, and engage the people that you want to serve, really give them a role to have their fingerprints on the thing that you want to build. And last, and I think most importantly and most fun, is this idea, this reminder, that iteration, slow growth with lots of stops and starts, lots of little failures, if you will, and successes, is the best way to grow and to build something amazing. And the best way to live. You can actually, even though I just used the word failure, I believe you can pretty much erase that sort of language from your vocabulary if you really believe in this concept of constant iteration. instead of saying, okay, I'm going to go plan something and I'm going to try and it's either going to work or it's not, this concept to me is really about just putting your best out there every day, being very honest about what's working and what's not every day, and then adjusting and changing and trying and trying and trying again. Even if you fall, get back up. It's this idea that you can kind of show up every day, and even if things aren't perfect, contribute something valuable. You know, Ambassador Corbin and I didn't know if I was going to mention this or not, but we were talking sort of about the great potential of Abu Dhabi. And it seems to me, from my very limited time here, it seems to me like every resource, every structure, everything is here. Everything that you could ever dream of to have this incredible, vibrant, and it's already happening, but this incredible, vibrant entrepreneurial community. The main thing that I think is a barrier, not just, and in fact, it sounds like it's really not that much of a barrier here, which is so exciting, but this culture of being willing to try and fail publicly and putting yourself out there and being vulnerable, putting something imperfect out there, that's the thing that makes the difference. In every society that has all these great resources, those aren't the issue. It's, is there a culture where people support entrepreneurship, meaning risk-taking, which means sometimes things don't work. So I've really admired entrepreneurs who, with much, much less, have decided to put themselves out there and every day try and try again. And the story I want to close with is of an entrepreneur named Patrick that I've met in Uganda a few years ago, who really embodies this to me. Now, he's not a Silicon Valley, you know, big city entrepreneur, and I've met a lot of those too. This is a very poor individual who, at one point in his life, a few years back, fled northern Uganda, had to relocate, start from scratch, and he had nothing, but he wanted his life to be better for himself and for his brother. So, like great entrepreneurs do, he, you know, just with the clothes on his back, no shoes on his feet, he sort of looked around and said, well, what do I have to work with here? Where's opportunity for me? He looked at the ground, realized no one else was using it, so he literally, we use these as cliches, but he literally rolled up his sleeves and dug his hands into the dirt and formed a brick with his bare hands, smoothed it out as much as he could, set it aside, did that again and again and again, sold those bricks for just a few pennies. Some of them broke, it wasn't perfect, but he got better over time, he refined it, he iterated. Eventually, he was able to buy a wooden mold to make his bricks more uniformly sized and shaped, sold those for a little bit more. Eventually was able to buy a matchbook, a box of matches, and build a self-contained kiln to bake the bricks. Sold those for a little bit more. When I met him, he had 3 employees and was a leader in his community because he had started with what everyone else would have said was nothing, but he believed that he could create value even out of the ground he was standing on and his own determination, his own desire to try and to put himself out there. So Patrick and so many other entrepreneurs that I've had the privilege of meeting all over the world in very unexpected and very poor places have gotten these 2 things right, and they see the potential not just in themselves but in others. Now, in my own journey, it took reframing the story of poverty for me to really see potential, and I'm so grateful that that happened, because as that happened, and as I reframed that story of poverty, it allowed me to respond differently and not just throw my change in the jar and play just that role, which is a wonderful role, but I wanted something slightly different. It allowed me to engage and be a partner and give not just of my money and my time, but of more of myself, of maybe a little bit of my heart to participate in really engaging with other individuals. And it led me to meet people like Winnie. And she, yes, a lot of the other individuals that I've met again in Silicon Valley and beyond have inspired me too, but it was really people, very simple, very poor entrepreneurs like Winnie, that finally showed me that I could choose to be an entrepreneur too. That's where I felt like I finally got permission and made the decision to live in this way as well. And that's what I really hope, that's the little piece of my heart that I want to leave you with the most, is that that decision, that choice is something that none of us can do for each other. We have to do for ourselves. We have to choose to see our own story in a way that allows us to give ourselves permission to go out there, pursue the dreams that we have, and live very creative entrepreneurial lives. And this is the thing that I want most for you, for all of us. This is the thing that I want most for my boys. Not necessarily that they go become entrepreneurs, but that they don't forget those truths that are so evident to me and that they remind me of every day, that the world is a great place with opportunities everywhere, and that we are all born with the potential that we need to do great things. And if we all do that, if we all choose that, I believe that nothing can stand in our way of really changing things for the better and making the world better together. Thank you.